Hello, everyone. My name is Tiffany Alexander, and I'm the Director of Human Resources here at New York Psychotherapy and Counseling Center. I just want to take this time out to extend a very warm welcome to everyone. Today's NYPCC webinar is truly going to be a special one because, as many of you know, the month of May is considered Mental Health Awareness Month. And during the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen an increase in the need of mental health services around the world, but especially here in New York. And at NYPCC, our doors have never closed, but we have remained open, for our clients, for the community. We are open 7 days a week. We provide evening hours and extended hours in order to accommodate, the needs of our clients. We know that our clients, you are the foundation in which our organization stands. So we just want you to know that we care for you, we stand with you, and that we are always here for you. So once again, welcome, and please enjoy the rest of the program.
Welcome back to our NYPCC Cafe. So I hope you all brought your mugs today with you because today's going to be such a wonderful topic. And before we begin our program, I would love to share some community announcements. So please stay muted at all times. If you have any questions, please just write it in the chat box below. For Spanish interpretation is available. Apriete el botón global para interpretación en español. Provide us with your name and email address in the chat box for a chance to enter our raffle and enjoy the show.
Hey Psych2Goers, do you remember the last time you felt sad, anxious, or scared that you were somehow off? You're not alone, even if it may feel like it. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, reports sometimes a funk or rough patch can be a sign of something much deeper. This video represents 10 mental health symptoms you shouldn't ignore. Before we begin, we need to warn you that this video may be triggering for some. If you feel triggered by this video, please take care of yourself, even if it means clicking off this video. With that being said, let's talk about the 10 mental health symptoms you should not ignore. 1. You're having feelings of sadness or depression that last longer than 2 weeks. All people experience sadness at one time or another. However, most normal feelings of sadness get better with time. The American Psychiatric Association reported abnormally intense sadness lasting 2 weeks could be a sign of depression. The National Institute of Mental Health stated, not being able to snap out of it or sadness being heavier than normal should be taken seriously. 2. You're having extreme mood swings and don't know why. You find that your mood seems to switch super quickly or randomly. Tremp and others studied how often the average person's mood shifts on any given day. According to the National Center of Biotechnology Information, NCBI, this study showed people tend to experience positive emotions, such as joy or love, more often than negative ones. but it's totally normal for someone's emotions to change daily. However, the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, NAMI, warns especially dramatic mood swings that cause huge changes in your behavior and energy can be a sign of bipolar disorder. Agencies such as the American Academy of Pediatrics say the more red flag signs are experiencing sadness, anger, or feelings of excessive euphoria for most of the day, especially if it has nothing to do with what's going on in your life. 3. Your worry and anxiety have gotten out of control. Have you ever found yourself worrying but can't shut it off? According to the National Institute for Mental Health, it may be a sign of an anxiety disorder. Other signs of anxiety disorders include having problems relaxing, insomnia, racing thoughts, unexplained aches and pains, or being easily irritated. The Anxiety and Depression Association of America suggests that if you've ever felt this way on most days for at least 6 months, you should consider talking to a mental health professional about your symptoms. 4. You've started withdrawing from others or isolating yourself. Taking time away from others can be positive for your mental health and physical health. But what if you constantly make excuses to avoid socializing? Mental health pros, such as Raymond Starr Jr. and Howard Dubowitz, say avoiding people or events you used to enjoy can be a sign of mental illness, such as depression, anxiety, or a psychotic disorder. 5. You may have noticed you're having delusions or hallucinations. Kumari and others describe the two aspects of psychosis, hallucinations and delusions, as a sense of perception or belief that creates a lot of urgency in the person experiencing it, despite evidence the perception or belief isn't real. The National Alliance on Mental Illness reports up to 100,000 people in the U.S. will experience psychosis every year. NAMI further stated 3 out of every 100 people will have a psychotic episode as a symptom of a physical or a mental illness, such as schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, in their lifetimes. 6. You're having more and more difficulty dealing with normal life situations. Have you ever gone through a time in your life when nothing seemed to go right and you just couldn't deal? The Australian Department of Health stated a rough patch that you just can't get past, one that hurts your ability to function for more than 2 weeks to 2 months, may be a sign of depression or anxiety. A major sign that what you're experiencing is more than just a rough patch is when you have a hard time functioning in normal situations for several weeks, according to Mental Health America. 7. You're sleeping too much or too little. The Harvard University School of Medicine believes that 10 to 18% of the general population has problems sleeping. However, Harvard's med school stated either sleeping too much or too little is 2 or 3 times more common in people who suffer from a mental illness. The Harvard Med School stated about 50% of people who live with ADHD, depression, anxiety, or bipolar disorder suffer from insomnia or hypersomnia, which means sleeping too much. 8. You started abusing drugs or alcohol. According to mentalhealth.gov, 1 in 4, or 25% of people who live with the symptoms of a mental illness use alcohol or drugs to self-medicate things like anger, anxiety, or mania. Experts believe individuals who suffer from depression, anxiety disorders, personality disorders, or schizophrenia are more likely to use drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism than people diagnosed with other mental illnesses. 9. You're having extreme anger outbursts. Do you ever feel anger that's almost impossible to control or way too much for the situation? If so, your anger may be warning you about your stress levels, unresolved grief, or your anxiety. Healthline reported extreme anger outbursts can also be a sign of unresolved trauma, bipolar disorder, alcohol abuse, obsessive compulsive disorder, intermittent explosive disorder, or depression. If you wonder if your anger is healthy, experts recommend first recognizing your physical and emotional signs of anger. And 10. You started thinking of self-harm or suicide. The Mental Health Foundation reported up to 10% of people under the age of 30 have thought about self-harm or suicide. There are many reasons people consider self-harm or suicide, such as abuse or neglect at home, a major loss, trauma, or a catastrophe that you can't control or avoid. Brodvik, 2018, reported approximately 90% of people who have completed suicide also suffered from a severe mental illness, such as bipolar disorder or depression. If you find yourself thinking about self-harm or suicide, we would very much like you to reach out to a mental health professional and get the help that you need and deserve. If you can relate to any of these symptoms on this list, you're definitely not alone, nor are you bad for feeling this way. But we want you to take care of yourself, which means reaching out to a mental health professional if you've been experiencing any of the symptoms on this list. As always, any information provided here is for educational purposes.
Hi, can you hear me? Just wanna make sure.
Yep, you're good to go.
Hi, welcome to the NYPCC Cafe. I'm Elliot Klein, I'm the CEO. And just to follow up on what Tiffany was saying before, we're very proud of the fact that we've been able to be open during the entire past 14 months of the pandemic to serve the communities of Bronx, East New York, and Bushwick. And we remain open, and we remain open in person and via telehealth. We have a great group of panelists today. We have Dela Cruz from the Youth Advocacy Corps. We have Dr. Regina Miranda, who's a professor at Hunter College. We have Assembly Member Amanda Septimo, who's from our 84th Assembly District in the South Bronx. And we have our very own Kristina Ruiz, who is the clinic administrator of our Bushwick Child and Family Mental Health Center. So sit back and enjoy. A lot of good information is going to be shared. Of course, if you know somebody who has a mental health problem, you know who to call. We're here for you. It's been a very trying time. A lot of people have been suffering for mental health problems during the pandemic, but we're here to help. All right, back to you, Selena.
Thank you so much, Elliot, for those great words and the testimonies of all that we're doing here at NYPCC. Welcome, everyone. My name is Selena, and I'll be your moderator for today. We'll get started with our guest speaker, our keynote speaker of the day. We have Dela Cruz, MHAP Program Director at Youth Advocacy Corps. Dela Cruz is a Brooklyn College graduate who majored in children and youth studies and psychology. She was born in the Dominican Republic and raised in the Bronx. Jenny started as an intern with the Youth Advocacy Corps and is now running both the Youth Advocacy Summer Institute and the Mental Health Awareness Project. She participates in events to raise awareness about social issues affecting children and youth. Without further ado, we introduce to you Dela Cruz.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So happy Mental Health Awareness Month. This is a very special month for me. This is my 6th anniversary where I came out of the dark and shared my mental illness and was able to get therapy. And for those of you that are here, and if you know anyone who's suffering and needs services, I hope that this session will be very beneficial for you all. Sorry. 6 years ago, I was suffering from depression and I was very afraid to talk about it. And I think that it's very appropriate that the title of this webinar is Untreated Mental Illness and its Dark Path. Yes, next slide. All right, so let's start talking. I want to know your thoughts in the chat for these 3 statements. So starting for the first one, all people with mental illness are dangerous. Is that true or false? Negative, false, false. Yes, and you are correct. Just the way that the media portrays people with mental illnesses, even in movies, the shows that we're watching, the way that mental illness is portrayed in the news makes it seem that it's dangerous, but it's a myth. Want to make sure that we clarify that people with mental illness are just human beings, just like everyone else. The second one, stigma and discrimination discourage people from seeking professional help and treatment. True or false? Yes, absolutely. True, true, true. Yes. And the average time for someone to really seek services is 10 years. That is a long time to wait. Not everyone has the luxury to suffer in silence for that long. I know it took me 10 years to really seek therapy. Loving the participation here too. All right, the third one. Most people living with mental illness lead productive life despite their challenges. True or false? True, true, true. Yes, so true. I'm here living proof that even with a mental illness, you can still run programming. I am very productive. I do a lot of social activism on top of I mentor students. I also enjoy working with the youth. I get them involved in many things when it comes to mental health and also make them feel comfortable in spaces, even virtually. I know the pandemic has definitely been hard on many of us. It's been very difficult, even for me living with a mental illness has made it more of a challenge to cope every day, but no worries. There's hope. There's always light at the end of the tunnel, right? All right, next slide, please. All right, so what is mental health? So sometimes we get the words mental health and mental illness confused, and we need to remember that mental health is something that we all have. It exists in all human beings. So mental health is the ability to function successfully in daily activity, such as being able to develop healthy relationship, ability to cope, and to adapt to different changes. And then what is a mental illness? So mental illness are mental disorders that causes disturbances in people in a person's emotion, thinking, and behavior. And we have to keep in mind that illnesses need to be diagnosed by professional. So not your neighbor telling you that you're depressed or that you're bipolar, or your mom telling you that you're bipolar. It needs to be diagnosed by someone who's a qualified professional. And why should we care about mental illnesses, right? Um, so every in a given year, around 44 million adults of 18 and older suffer from a mental illnesses. So there's a lot of people that are suffering in silence that we're not even sure if these numbers can be higher, if people can come up and really talk about. But there's this black cloud in our society where we're not supposed to talk about mental illnesses, right? You're seen as weak if you are suffering of a mental illnesses, like we're being judged by our family, by our friends, or even at work could be another place where you can feel the stigma about disclosing a mental illness. So I'm pretty sure that these numbers are higher if we could get more people to talk about it. Another thing that I wanted to share also that people have developed negative attitude towards people with mental illness as a result of can result of not getting help. So these are could be cultural barriers. It could be the way that our society views people with mental illnesses. As we mentioned on the previous slides, there's a notion that people think that people with mental illnesses are very dangerous. I am very like calm and tranquil. I wouldn't even kill a roach. So that's how calm and collective I am. All right, next slide, please. So what causes mental illness? As we know, there's not a single factor that does. It can be can contribute to multiple things. It could be your biological factor, either your genes, the environment, right? Even COVID, right? The many people, I think, we shared at the beginning of the presentation that many people are now seeking services, right? So the pandemic has definitely have caused people to experience more psychological trauma or challenges. Many people are losing families and friends, co-workers. We're not even sure about the future. So there's a lot of anxiety about what's next. And I wanted to share that the two most common disorders are depression and anxiety, which depression being the number one leading cause, not only in the United States, but I also read that worldwide is the leading cause of disability. So this can definitely impair someone's ability to get out of bed, to be able to work, to be able to take care of their children, to be able to do something simple as their laundry, take a shower, be able to carry on with daily tasks that might be very mundane for the rest of us, but it could be very, very difficult. I know that for me, there are many days where it was very, very hard just to get one foot out of the bed. So I can definitely know what it feels like when you're feeling at your lowest. All right, next slide, please. All right, so what are some early warning signs of mental distress? So the way that I like to put it into categories, think about how does it affect your body, how does it affect your mind, and how does it affect your behavior? As the video shared in the beginning, if you're experiencing maybe 5 or more of these symptoms for a period of 2 weeks or more, this is when it's great to reach out to a mental health professional or to someone that can help you seek services. NYPCC is very amazing. There's no wait list here, so you can be easily treated. The therapists here are multilingual. So there's going to be someone that's going to speak your language, so that can eliminate one of the barriers. I know that for me, when I'm at my lowest of my depression, I feel a lot of low energy, sleep problems, like unexplained pains and aches, which might sound like COVID symptoms as for now, but yeah. But also these could be symptoms of depression. Also in the mind, when you're feeling unmotivated, you're feeling anger, helplessness and hopeless, and feeling numb, like nothing matters. Is something that is very dangerous, and many of our young people are also experiencing this symptom. So it's very good to recognize if you see someone that you love or someone close to you that you know what's normal for them. If you see that there's something off, it's a great way to check in and to see how they're doing. This is a world where it's so competitive and we seem to be running like robots, and we forget to remember that we're also humans and that we carry a lot of weight on our shoulders. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of factors. We're carrying traumas that maybe no one is aware of, and people are battling inner battles that we have no idea. So we must be kind to each other because we don't know who's battling what in the inside of, since we can't really see mental illnesses. Next slide, please. So what are some barriers when seeking mental health treatment? So language is the first one, right? So let's say immigration status is another key one that could kind of put someone scared if they are living in mixed status household of seeking treatments. There's always that question, who do you live with? And they start asking personal things people do not feel comfortable sharing, that can stop them from seeking services. There's also a distrust in professionals, right? And this could be like a cultural thing. We do in my organization, we do a lot of mental health workshops, and I encounter a school where a teacher was telling the students not to share personal stories with us, as not to put their business out there. So we want to make sure that we also are not passing this down to our children, right? Of talking of building this distrust in professionals in terms of talking your business and keeping things to yourself. Another one is stigma. Stigma is a big one, like, and then the family matters, right? Keeping things private is another key component why people are not seeking services. I know for me, stigma and shame and embarrassment were the key three for me. Just because I felt if I was going to see a therapist, I thought my family would have thought that I didn't have my things put together. Maybe I was weak or a shame to the family. Like nobody wants to have like that loca, right? Like loca means crazy in Spanish, the loca of the house. Another one also could be poverty, right? In their decision in seeking treatment, less access to treatment also. Like some neighborhoods, we probably don't have access to a mental health clinics, um, let alone we're under resources as well. An ability to find quality treatment. I know that that was very hard when I first started my journey for my mental health services. At that time, I didn't know NYPCC, so I remember going online and seeking a therapist. And I felt that I needed to seek someone from a different culture because I thought if I got someone who was Hispanic, they were probably not going to understand me. And I remember getting this Filipino therapist who saved my life. And thanks to her, her name is Dr. Alma, which Alma means soul in English. So yeah, she restored my soul. So I owe her a lot of my recovery. And then the last one is lacking multicultural mental health professionals, right? So this is very important. If we feel that we're not understood, if people that don't look like us or maybe haven't been through the problems that we've been through, the traumas we've experienced, it's hard to open up to professionals that feel a disconnect with you. So these are some of the key points of why could be a reason why people are not seeking treatment. All right, thank you. Anthony, next slide. So what happens when mental illness is left untreated, right? This is like the scary part. The first one is worsening mental health problems. This can definitely, someone who's maybe going through depression and not, and is being undiagnosed and is probably experiencing severe symptoms. This can lead to more mental health problems, and a wide range of problems can perceive from that. For example, for me, I remember not being able, like going to work was hard for me. there was days where probably I couldn't get out of bed and probably will be late to work. And it just wasn't because I was being irresponsible, but it was just because it took longer to get out of bed. And I felt scared to share that with my employer at the time, that I couldn't function. I couldn't get out of bed. I was having a hard time even putting my thoughts together, even knowing what day of the week it was. So it's very important for people that are experiencing any mental health concerns, or anyone that you know, that you try to get them connected to services, because it could definitely get worse from there. Next slide, please. So homelessness and job stability issues. So this again goes back to the story that I share about my job, right? Not being able to get out of bed and being late. It's not because I wanted to be late and wanted to be responsible, but it's because of the circumstances that kind of held me back and couldn't let me be able to function as a regular human, a member of society. And another one that I wanted to add, also someone who's having a difficult time like communicating. So someone who's having like schizophrenia, who's listening to hallucinations or probably talking to themselves, can definitely cause an alarm and concern for other people, and a lot of judgment. And maybe they might not want to go to work or maybe go to school, and it could definitely potentially lead to financial hardships of homelessness and not having a job. Yes. Next slide, please. Another potential is also incarceration, right? So if you are experiencing undiagnosed mental illness, this can definitely trigger you if you're encountering certain traumatic encounters either with the police. You might be seen as non-compliant. If you are maybe having a flashback of something that is traumatizing, is out of your control. And I just wanted to share that 73% of female state inmates and 55% of male inmates have a mental illness. So it makes me question, what are we doing as a society to help people that are suffering? Are we putting them in jail, or are we getting them treatment? So these numbers were incredibly high, especially for females. 73 females are experiencing a mental illness. All right. The next one, right, is also the feeling like you're being victimized and also causing more trauma. So this could be potentially cause you a more of a unusual behavior, and people can definitely take advantage of you. And trauma is something that is it's kind of like embedded in you, and it's very hard to kind of like snap out of it, especially if you don't have the coping skills, if you don't have the tools to do that. Trauma is one of the leading causes why people are in silence, are suffering, because they're scared to share, either if they've been sexually abused, if they've been victims of domestic violence. There's something that this culture is like, you have to keep your business to yourself, and people are not sharing when they're going through things. All right, next slide. And suicide, yeah. So this one is very scary. I work with young people, and I make sure that they know that there's help out there, that even if they feel pinned to the wall, that there's services, there's chat lines, there's text lines that they can get help. And suicide is the second leading cause of death for the ages of 10 to 24, which the numbers are super high. I remember in my teenage years, someone really close to me attempting suicide. Thankfully, they were unsuccessful. And 2 months ago, someone really close to me as well attempted suicide. So this is very scary. People are carrying masks. People are not really sharing how they're feeling. And the ones that you see the happiest are sometimes are the ones that have the most inner battle, and we have know nothing about. And we tend to make people feel ashamed for feeling these thoughts of not wanting to live, whether it's a religious reason or whether it's family, or just telling you there's people who have worse problems than you, and there's a lack of empathy in this society. I feel there's a lack of empathy, there's a lack of compassion. People are really quick to judge and not really understand that when you are battling something alone, you're like your prisoner in your own mind. And that can be even worse than being in a jail. Like being in prison in your own mind could definitely lead you to feel that it's your fault, that you're a flaw, like what's wrong with you, like you don't belong here. You feel like you're not in tune to this world. So they're better off with you being dead. And this is when it gets really scary. We want to make sure that people know that there are options out there. And when someone is at this point in their life when they're feeling suicidal, it's just they need to be heard. They just need someone to talk to and to be heard. Very important to let people talk. Next slide. All right, and these are 6 tips on reducing mental health stigma. As we mentioned in the beginning, stigma is one of the key factors why people are not seeking services. I wanted to share these tips that were created by our young advocates at the Mental Health Awareness Project. And I will just quickly go over it just for the sake of time. The first one is know the facts, educate yourself and others about mental health, right? So the fact that there's 118 participants here and we're all learning about mental health and mental illnesses and what are the potential risk factors of developing a mental illness, it warms my heart knowing that there's people out here that are getting informed and they're going to take back this information and spread it like wildfire. So it's very important to know the facts and also debunk myths about people being violent or people that are mentally ill are only the ones that are homeless. It could be people, someone in a suit, and it doesn't discriminate social status. It doesn't discriminate race, ethnicity, mental illnesses. It can happen to anybody. The second one, don't judge, be aware of your attitudes and behavior, right? So sometimes the way that we're addressing people with mental illnesses, right? Calling them loca or crazy, can definitely make someone feel unworthy of living. The third one is listening is key. So this one we got from Cruz here at NYPCC. It's called the 80-20, and it's not your beef at the supermarket. It's actually the 80 listening part and 20 talking and advising. So it's very important to let people talk. Sometimes we just need to let things out. When you feel caved in, you just need someone to listen to you talk and just pour it out. And sometimes you'll feel better. When you have someone who's just listening non-judgmental and giving you the opportunity to talk out your feelings, and that can be very healing. Number 4, ask about how can you help. So it's very important to don't make assumptions. There's always like when people ask for a check-in, when I say a check-in, don't say, are you okay? No, we want to ask you, how are you feeling today? So given that open-ended for people to really share, okay, I'm struggling or I'm feeling great, I'm sad, I'm frustrated. So very, very important to do check-ins. And number 5 is choose your words carefully, right? So the way that we use language can definitely impact how someone is feeling. It can also reinforce stereotypes and discrimination against people that are going through mental health challenges. And number 6, be optimistic, right? So know that even though those people that are going through their mental health challenges, they can still achieve wellness. They can still function in society. They can still hold jobs. They can still go to school. They can be parents, friends. They can be sisters, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters. So don't let the aspect of someone having a mental illness like be the only thing that you want to focus on as the defining personality trait or some sort. So I want to take this opportunity to also share that when it comes to mental health stigma, it's important for us to break the cycle now so we can encourage those young people that are now experiencing a lot of COVID related stress to be able to open up and don't hush our young people. Don't hush people in general. I think it's very important for us to talk about our mental health and not just because it's Mental Health Awareness Month, but it's all every day. It should be your priority. Talking about because you can function if you don't have your overall health together. If you don't have the physical health, if you don't have your mental health, your social health, it's very difficult to function in society if you don't have all those components together. So it's very important to let people express themselves. All right, thank you, Anthony. Next slide. All right, so your mental health counts, right? So it's very important that you self-care. I want to know in the chat, what is your favorite self-care tips? Like I know for me, it's like lavender, essential oils or diffusers, really like to journal. Can people share in the chat what are some of their favorite self-care? Oh, chocolate, yum, eating, laughing, gym, exercising, yes. Great, journaling, music, right? Music, getting dancing. I know dancing is great. I love to dance. A lot of merengue. I'm actually in the Dominican Republic here, so there's a lot of music and background. There's people always dancing here, so it's great. Kickboxing, that sounds like a good one. Laughing, being outdoors, reading, eating, praying. Yes, writing, music, meditation. Yes, and I want to encourage you all to practicing self-care, whether it's just a minute a day or 5 minutes a day, or even have a self-care routine. Make sure your mental health is your key priority, because you can't pour out of an empty cup. All right, next slide, please, Anthony. And then to end it off, for those of you that are here, NYPCC is a great partner for the Youth Advocacy Corps. We actually do referrals to our students that we do workshops with, and they're open 7 days a week. They have 3 main locations. You can also do over the phone therapy. The staff there is amazing. They speak many languages. I really encourage, I wish I knew about NYPCC when I first started my journey. So this is a great partnership here. And those of you that know someone, or if you yourself feel that you might need to talk to a professional, I really encourage, it's very healing and very powerful when you open up and you're able to share with someone who's not going to be judgmental, who's just going to give you that ear, that just to listen. What are you going through? So very important to seek mental health professionals when you feel that you need, even for you or your family member, someone that you know. Very important to make therapy more like accessible, and make sure that we're having these conversations. It's very important to start talking about mental health as young as even in elementary school. We do workshops as young as elementary school. We do them for adults. We do them for high schoolers. So we want to make sure that every age group is talking about mental health, and that they know that help is out there, and to ensure that it's okay not to be okay. Like, we don't have to be here pretending to be something that we're not. It's okay if you're having a moment of sadness. It's okay if you're experiencing something traumatic. Just know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that things will get better. And this shall pass. This pandemic shall pass. And hopefully one day we could all be together in a space again where could be able to share and interact and feel the humanity again. Don't let this pandemic kind of define how we should be interacting, right? We should be able to socially distance and be able to see our loved ones, and taking precautions. Of course, if you are someone who has like a weak immune system, just take precautions, and you can still have a productive social life regardless of the pandemic. Thank you so much. I want to thank you all for listening and letting me share my story. I hope this inspires someone who's there, who's probably thinking about therapy. I would highly recommend it. It was a game changer for me, and I know it will be for you. So don't be afraid to use the services here at NYPCC. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Jenny. That was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much for your transparency, for sharing your story with us. You are truly an overcomer. Yes, claps for Jenny. Awesome, awesome, awesome. We will now turn it over and introduce some of our panelists. And to start off, we have Assemblywoman Amanda Septimo, who represents the 84th District. Amanda Septimo is a lifelong Bronx resident with a long, rich history of service to the community. Her spirit of activism and community leadership began in her adolescence and can be traced through the entirety of her career. At just 12 years old, Amanda became aware of the prevailing social, economic, and environmental injustices within our community, and soon began to organize around these causes throughout the South Bronx. Thank you, Amanda Septimo. Dr. Regina Miranda is a professor at Hunter College. Dr. Miranda is a professor of psychology at Hunter College, where she directs the laboratory for the study of youth cognition and suicide, and she is also a faculty member in the doctoral program in health psychology and clinical science at the Graduate Center of the City of New York. Her research focuses on understanding why young people think about and attempt suicide in a way that can inform assessment, treatment, and prevention of suicide risk. Thank you, Dr. Miranda. Up next, we have our very own Kristina Ruiz, Program Administrator here at NYPCC. Prior to joining New York Psychotherapy and Counseling Center in 2012, she worked as a trauma therapist for 6 years, conducting therapy with children impacted by domestic violence and sexual abuse at a family trauma center in Nassau County. Since joining NYPCC, she has worked as a therapist and clinical supervisor, overseen and expanded the intake department, and worked as the assistant administrator for both Brooklyn clinics until her recent promotion to program administrator. She also continues to practice psychotherapy with adults and adolescents in a small private practice. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us. And I would like to give Assemblywoman Septimo the floor right now.
Great, thank you so much. It is so lovely to be here with you all. I will be very brief because I'm more interested in hearing what everyone else has to say. I just want to thank you all for the critically important work that you do. I think now we're kind of steeped in Mental Health Awareness Month, and so it is really present. But to the points that Jenny was making before, it's not just in Mental Health Awareness Month that mental health is important and should be prioritized. And that's true not only from a self-care and personal care perspective, but also from a policy and sort of placemaking and community building perspective as well. And so I'm really excited that you all are here doing this work all the time because we need this work centered, again, not only during Mental Health Awareness Month, but all the time. And so I'm eternally grateful to you and indebted to you for the things that you do for our community. And I look forward to continuing to support those efforts and grow them in any way that I can.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Septimo. And while I have you on, I would like to take the opportunity to ask you the first question. COVID-19 has built a dramatic increase in mental health cases. What is your position in advocating for the vulnerable individuals in your district and city as a whole?
Well, that's a great point. And I think COVID-19 has drawn mental health really into focus for a lot of people. I think not only from kind of experiencing trauma and managing it, but I think all of us watching the city go through this collective trauma, but also understanding that some people are dealing with mental health issues as a result simply of the pandemic. And then others are dealing with some that may have been exacerbated by this year that we all just lived through. And I think that, again, to the point that mental health is something that we need to look at every point. In the school budget, we've just allocated a lot of space for mental health providers in schools. We're also now meaningfully thinking about folks who struggle with addiction and substance abuse issues, how that intersects with mental health. Thinking about young adults who are out of school and out of work, and that out of school, out of work population, 16 to 24, kind of figuring themselves out, how that has impact on mental health. And so I think mental health is one of those issues that really can serve as an umbrella. Everywhere you look, there is a mental health issue, right? Even in environmental justice, you could make the case that the impact it has impact on people's mental health, and we have to be thinking about policy and approach and community building and placemaking through that lens, or we're truly doing a disservice to our communities. And so that's the type of advocate that I hope to continue to be for the community, one that's saying, you know, none of these issues are siloed, especially not mental health, and we need to be considering it at every step.
Thank you so much. I think you answered that perfectly. You mentioned, you know, those struggling, getting mental health services, not leaving their homes. So as you may know, telehealth has provided the opportunity for many individuals unable to come out during COVID-19 to receive therapy in the comfort of their homes. What is your position regarding to telehealth staying as a choice for service provision?
You know, I'll say, I think COVID-19 threw our world into a tailspin and changed so many things about what we could even conceive of in terms of what's real, what's not. And I think there are a few silver linings to come from it. And one of those silver linings is rethinking accessibility across the board. How do we get critical services to people, meeting people where they are? That's a phrase that we use often. But for whatever reason, hadn't leaned into technology as this really useful tool to actually reach people where we know they are, which is on the internet. And I think that telehealth having such a boom is really incredible, and an opportunity for us to continue leaning into meeting people where they are and getting people services by any means necessary. And so I know that the state is kind of has proactively passed some laws to say, okay, here are the things that were kind of considered emergency provisions because of COVID, now making them permanent. Because again, if these services are helping people, then who cares how they get them? We just need to make sure that they get them. And so I'm really excited to keep doing whatever I can to grow that effort. And again, just continue to think about how do we get people what they need, and work backwards from that point instead of looking at what you have and trying to decide what you can come up with. It's like, what do you need and how do I get there?
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Septimo, for your time and just answering some valid questions that we needed answers to. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I would like to direct the next question to Dr. Miranda. We're talking about, the struggles in, getting our family members to receive services. So, Dr. Miranda, what barriers can a family face when trying to get a family member to accept mental health services, and what can they do?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of different barriers. One is, as Ms. Dela Cruz pointed out, the stigma about talking about mental health. Sometimes people can think that if they talk about their mental health, people are going to think they're crazy, that people are going to label them, that it's going to negatively impact them, without realizing that sometimes what they're going through is affecting our emotional health and well-being affects all aspects of our lives. And so we tend to put that to the side, thinking, okay, physical health is important, our jobs are important, family, but really our well-being, our emotional health and well-being affects all of those things. And so it's easy to leave it to the side. And so you think, oh, I'll deal with it on my own. It's not, I can do it on my own. Or, because you don't want to be labeled, you don't want, if people at, your friends find out or people at work find out, that they'll think differently about you. In other instances, people might have had negative experiences with mental health, the mental health system or the healthcare system in general. So some people, especially older generations might have a mistrust of the healthcare system in general because it maybe didn't serve them well in the past, or maybe they had an experience with a provider who wasn't a good fit. And so I think it's important to, even if it doesn't work out the first time, to still to try again, because, there's variability in not every provider is going to be the best fit for you, for every client. And so I think, being flexible to try out, if it doesn't work out the first time, to maybe try to a different provider, acknowledging that in the past, our systems haven't adequately served all communities. And so there are valid concerns. It's important to validate some of those concerns. Also, we as friends and family members can normalize talking about our own mental health and struggles. And if we've ever gone to therapy ourselves, I think it's important to model for other people. If we're not willing to do it ourselves, and we can't really expect other people to do it either. And so I think those are some barriers, and I think ways of overcoming those barriers. And even normalizing it, say in our communities of faith, right? Our communities of faith where, part of it deals with our emotional, spiritual well-being, but we tend not to, even in those communities, normalize talking about mental health. And we know, for example, that many pastors struggle with mental health. And so I think the more people who have the pulpits, for example, or who have the microphone are willing to acknowledge this as something that's normal to talk about, that affects many of us. And I think that it'll really impact people's willingness to seek care.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miranda. What you said just takes me to a point where I know you spoke about, spirituality and things of that nature. And I know that culture sometimes plays a big part. So I'd like to direct the next question to Jenny Dela Cruz. Jenny, what role does culture play in accepting the diagnosis and treatment of a mental illness? Okay, we can move on. Let's direct our next question to Kristina. Kristina, can you explain how psychotherapy can differ from children and adults?
Hi, everyone. So I think probably the most practical and basic way that it might differ between children and adults is really the delivery method. So we really want to meet everybody, whether you're a senior citizen, middle-aged, or a child, where you're at. And oftentimes for children or adolescents, that may mean not being a child with them, but going down to that childlike level, looking at our language and even our methodologies. So we typically tend to do a lot of talk therapy with our adults. And with children, and especially really young children, we want to kind of communicate in the language that they understand, which often is play. So there may be a lot more play therapy involved. There may be a lot of other more creative interventions that are used, using a lot more art and more of the expressive delivery methods to kind of meet that child where they're at, create that comfort level. And then the other thing is just the inclusion of who's involved in therapy. You know, there are certain barriers as far as like, you know, families being involved and wanting to participate, you know, and as an adult, if you have those people in your life that are willing to participate and want to take a role in helping you get better, that's amazing. We find that that's often more the case with kids because we have a mom or we have a dad or we have a grandparent. So oftentimes there will typically be more people involved in that child's mental health, continuing to support and also carry on the interventions throughout the week.
I love that you mentioned families because this next question is about how do you work with parents who may be in denial about her child emotional challenges?
Oh, that's a good one. So, right. And especially I think when we're working with kids or adolescents, we really want to take a look at the family as a whole, you know, and we were talking about that word stigma was thrown around a couple of times. And sometimes parents can be having a lot of different feelings and emotions and even just beliefs about my child being in therapy. And I think part of that is trying to talk with the parents and figuring out what does that mean to them that their child is being brought for therapy. You know, sometimes it's not always the parent's idea to bring the child or the adolescent for therapy. It may be school that's mandating this, you know, maybe other people that are kind of taking that decision-making away from the legal guardians and saying, hey, no, your kid has to be in therapy and this is why. So it really is kind of fostering that relationship with the parent or guardian, trying to, you know, really talk about why is your child here, you know, maybe taking away some of those beliefs that I somehow made my child like this, or this is my fault, or this is, you know, a reflection of my parenting, and this is why my child is here. And then really trying to find common ground with the parent, you know, becoming an ally with them, and just saying, hey, okay, you're here now, right? And in the cases where you're mandated, you know, how can we make this work for you? What do you want out of this? And really trying to put that power and control back on the parent so they really can take ownership and feel, you know, like this is going to foster some good habits, some good relationships, and also hopefully they can get a benefit out of it.
Thank you so much, Kristina. I definitely agree with you in regards to, parents struggling and, being in denial. And so I would like to direct my next question back to Dr. Miranda. In your research, what factors may contribute to someone developing a mental illness? I know that oftentimes people think that this is something that it may be hereditary, of course, but sometimes they just want to know about some research. So what would you say?
Yeah, it's a combination of factors. Family history can play a role, but just because you have a family history doesn't mean that a person will develop mental health related symptoms. So a combination. Sometimes it's some conditions are more biological. For example, schizophrenia is one that's has a more biological loading. Others tend to be more a combination of some individual vulnerability plus something that happens in the environment. So for example, suffering an early parental loss, we know can increase risk for depression. Having a history of trauma can increase risk for developing post-traumatic stress disorder, or even increase risk for suicidal thoughts or suicidal behaviors. And not just individual like traumas, but systemic and collective traumas. So for example, if someone has experienced a long history of systemic racism, or has been in an environment that it kind of increases your baseline anxiety. So sometimes that kind of heightens your risk for say anxiety disorders, or even depression, suicidal thoughts, trauma related symptoms. Even we know that dissociation, which can also lead to psychosis, has also been linked to experiences of discrimination, of racial discrimination, for instance. So it's very multi-determined. Also, the ways that we think about our thoughts and feelings, like when we experience anxiety, or when we have depression, for example, a tendency to dwell on those negative feelings and to think, why am I feeling this way? What's wrong with me? Does this mean I'm going crazy? kind of a tendency to dwell on the negative feelings can actually increase and sustain those feelings versus kind of noticing that they're there and letting them go, or trying to distract ourselves with something else. And with anxiety also, a tendency to avoid the things that induce anxiety can actually heighten the anxiety. So in the short term, it may decrease our anxiety. So if you're afraid, if you're afraid of something and you try not to do it as much as possible, that can actually increase the anxiety in the long term, versus sitting with the anxiety and kind of letting yourself be in the moment and realize, okay, this is not going to last forever. This will go away eventually. And then you learn to develop those coping skills in the face of the thing that makes you anxious.
I love that. I love that. Our next question is directed to Jenny De La Cruz. Dr. Miranda just spoke a lot about risks and folks dwelling in their mental health challenges or issues. And so, Jenny, I want to ask, what are some of the coping strategies you would recommend for people living with a mental illness?
I would recommend for people first to be honest with themselves in terms of what the symptoms that they're experiencing. Keeping like a journal of documenting when they're experiencing things on their lows, just to see like what exactly is it that is triggering them. Another thing is to also seek their professional as well, not to be afraid to call their professional, or even asking friends and families for help. Another one that I would recommend is setting boundaries and making sure people are respecting your boundaries. So that is something that I do a lot to help me keep my sanity. And another thing that I like to do is also set routines of self-care routines that I can easily do. For example, every morning when I wake up and before I go to bed, I do my 5 gratitudes of the day, and just to keep me in that positive mindset and not letting that mental funk get to me. So I would really recommend, not just to someone with a mental illness, but everyone here to practice self-care. Simple things, just like eating chocolate, something so simple.
Who doesn't love chocolate, right? Thank you so much, Jenny. And I'm gonna ask one more question directed to Kristina Ruiz. And this question is more towards, I know we talked a lot about, treatment and risk and some factors and background history, right? But we didn't really talk about medication. And I want to ask you, Kristina, some people are concerned about medication, which may pose a barrier to treatment. When is medication recommended?
So yeah, that's a really good question. Sometimes there's, cultural expectations and beliefs that impact just the role of medication. Sometimes there's just misinformation. So I think when it comes to medication, it really starts with education. What does it mean? What does it not mean? I think also this idea, reinforcing with people their autonomy, that they can choose the best treatment methodology for them. And for some people that is medication treatment. And for some people it's, verbal therapy or other different sorts of specialized, therapy. And I think increasing the education about what medication can do and can't do. I think the other side of that also is reminding people that, some medications, it's for the long term. It's about adjusting your daily functioning, right? So that long-term depression doesn't impact you, or ongoing anxiety doesn't continue to negatively impact going to work, going to school, interacting with other people. So it's not just going to be like, I take a Tylenol and it's good. So reminding people what the expectations are, what their fears might be, reminding them that they always have, the ability to say yes or no, to really ask questions. And I think just coming alongside people and kind of being a coach in that way, and, validating a lot of their fears, talking about what medications are and aren't, why they're used in certain situations for safety, or again, just long-term improvement of daily functionings and stability. But I think education and really just being culturally sensitive, because I think even within the bigger cultures, we've got subcultures, we've got religions and faiths and different things like that. So just really being culturally aware and allowing the patient to kind of talk about, or the family to kind of talk about what their fears and concerns are, not being dismissive and talking it through with them.
Thank you so much, Kristina. Great response. And I'm sure that everyone here has received all the information that they can. I know I'm learning a lot, even though I work in mental health, right? I'm still learning. We always learn something new every day. And now I would like to address some of the comments and questions that are in the chat. I'll read the first one and then I'll delegate my partner Anthony to take some of the questions down. But we have a question here that says, this question can be asked in the forum. Oh, please ask this question in the forum. How do I convince my 13-year-old that she needs to speak to someone? Due to her father and I going through a divorce, she has withdrawn a bit. So anyone can answer. Who would like to go first?
I can go. I feel like I'm still spotlighted there, so I'm feeling that pressure to go. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, whether you're a kid, a teen, or an adult, you know, when it's somebody else who's wanting you to go, it could be, you know, a bit tough. But I think it's, you know, really just expressing your love and concern, you know, for your kid, you know, trying to communicate that this is coming from a place where, you know, you're continuing to act as a parent and you're going to see a need, or you're going to think that you see a need and you want to try and meet that, you know, seeing, you know, what your daughter or son, you know, thinks about that, why you think that that might be important, even just this idea of trying it. Right? It doesn't mean you have to commit 100%. It could be like, hey, let's go together, maybe joining your child, you know, and saying, you know, this is a really rough time for me. I'm wondering if this is going to be a really rough time for you. Let's go and talk to somebody maybe, you know, once or twice and see if it might be helpful for us to continue in this. So I think just that collaboration, you know, that idea of this is coming from a place of love, you know, and care and concern. And I'm even willing, you know, to go with you because in this particular case, you know, I think as a parent, we're all going to go through a rough time and there's just going to be a lot of change.
I agree.
Selena, we have one for Dr. Miranda.
Awesome.
Dr. Miranda, how can we help children who blatantly say they want to kill themselves?
Well, I think if a child verbalizes that they want to kill themselves, I think it's important to, you know, to try to get them help. First of all, not to overreact to the fact that they're might be having suicidal thoughts, because, you know, about 1 in 5 kids in the course of a year will have suicidal thoughts. So just because they're having suicidal thoughts does not mean that they're going to attempt suicide, but still treat it seriously and talk to a mental health professional. And at the same time, keep the lines of communication open with your child. And so, you know, start off maybe by talking about something. If they're less willing to talk about how their feelings, start off by talking about something else that's small, having conversations about other, you know, small things that they might be interested in to kind of open up the conversation to talking about their feelings. And then I would suggest having them see a mental health professional who could do a fuller assessment.
Thank you. And this is for Kristina Ruiz. For those whom isolation and withdrawal is a symptom of their mental illness, is telehealth just a way of them to remain isolated?
That's a really good question. Whoever asked that, that's really good. I think it really depends where the individual is at, right? So if we're talking about somebody who already maybe is reluctant about engaging and participating with mental health services, and is kind of like at that beginning stage, you know, of their journey, I want to say, however they're comfortable, you know, first getting their foot in the door and kind of eliciting those services, I think that's okay. I think that at that point, you know, the therapist and the client hopefully will continue to work together to discuss and kind of assess, is this delivery method continuing to help you manage and reduce some of these negative symptoms? Or has it now become a tool where it's enabling, you know, these symptoms? But I think if we're talking about the beginning of somebody's journey, and it can be really difficult, somebody suffering with anxiety or really severe depression, to even think about leaving the house, you know, to have a visit. I think right now that's where telehealth can be really essential and really effective to getting them connected and to start the ball rolling.
Thank you, Kristina. And I'm not sure if I see any other ones in the chat. I know there's a
Yeah,
lot.
there's a question here that says, is it true that the longer you suffer from depression, the chemicals in your brain will make it worse? What is the science behind long-term untreated emotional distress? Maybe Dr. Miranda can answer that question.
Well, I think it's more of an issue that the longer or the more episodes of depression a person has had, the harder it is to treat, and so it might take longer and more intensive therapy. So yeah, there is some evidence that there are changes in the differences in the brain. We don't know necessarily about changes in the brain that happen as a result of long-term depression, but we know that there are brain differences, but it's more that when it's more chronic, usually that means that it started earlier. And so it's just longer standing and it can be harder to overcome, but but with treatment, of course, that we know that therapy for depression has high efficacy, especially with adults. And there can be combinations of treatments. So sometimes it might be psychotherapy in combination with medication. Sometimes it might be one type of therapy combined with an adjunctive, sorry, long day today, adjunctive additional treatment to help with like more treatment resistant depression.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miranda. And I think that's all for the questions that we have. Thank you so much to all of our panelists, to our keynote speaker for your amazing work and contributions to today's webinar. And thank you all again. And I hope to see you all and at our other webinars. And I'll now turn it over back to our partner, Jonathan, for closing. Thank you.
Thank you, Selena. And wow, what an amazing webinar this was. I would like to thank our panelists for their participation and for this presentation. I also want to thank our parents and our professionals in the audience for joining us today. We know that people are Googling mental health services. They're asking their friends, they're asking professionals, and it would mean the world to us if you can just please follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, at NYPCC, and give us a like. Also, please give us a review on Google and on Yelp. Again, I want to thank you all for joining us, and we're going to see you all on our next NYPCC Cafe on Wednesday, June 9th at 2 p.m.